Hello, this is Publishing Without Supervision podcast, and I am your host, Erica Conroy. Today, unfortunately, Xavier was unable to make it because he has some issues he has to deal with and about 4 days of work he has to catch up on. So I thought I'd let him off the hook today. But it's okay because joining me today is our guest, Michael Chatfield. Welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Hi, thanks for having me.
That's awesome. Thank you for agreeing to come on. Now, we're going to go straight into the topic at hand, which is a genre called LitRPG and seems to be a hot and trending genre at the moment. So let's start with the obvious question. What is LitRPG?
That's kind of it's a funny question because there's actually a lot of debate going on right now over what is lit RPG and what isn't.
Okay.
Basically, what it's come down to is lit RPG is fiction, fantasy based or whatever basis you want to, but there has to be a degree of game changing, like level ups or skills or something that you can see the advancement of the main characters or characters in the book. So, like, what I mean by that is have his character sheets, much like you would have in D&D or you would have in, say, video games of multiple types. And it has a basis of vitality or agility or strength, those kind of monikers. And you can see through the book as the character does things that they are increasing their skills. Then you can also have screens where it's like showing off weapons, so like plus 10 to defense or plus 20 to attacking power. So like those kind of things that have only really been seen in video games into the books, and you're seeing like they have an actual effect. So like you have a sword that's just going to be like a normal iron sword, and the person doesn't have that much attacking ability. But then sometimes they can spontaneously find like a legendary sword, becomes so much more powerful that it reflects like a level 10, say, goblin. And then you can see the progression of how their skills actually come together, and they grow as a character in their abilities, whatever that may be.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like the character sheets the lists all of their skills and abilities, and so like in a computer game, you're basically leveling up, but at the same time, your character is also developing narratively wise as well.
Yeah, like it gets into it's strange because you're gonna have a very it's a cross section usually of things, because you've got your video games narrative that you have in like an epic fantasy, so like matched with Skyrim's like gaming system.
Yeah.
Very odd, but you can do a lot of interesting things with it, and especially like when we have stuff like VR and augmented reality that are going into that, and other like books that are going into that. This is it's a very way for things to meld together, I guess.
So, and it's not exactly really a new genre. It's something that's really been around for, I'd say, at least 40 years, going back to maybe the fighting fantasy series of books, the choose your own adventure type of things. Would you say they would be included in lit RPG?
I think technically they would, simply because like when you're doing them, you're growing through the story, and your character or the person you're playing is growing as it goes. It's just it's developed a lot differently, because I think it was the Russians actually. There's a different segments of, but they're divided differently. So there's like Asian light novels and that kind of thing. And sometimes they have numbers, sometimes they don't. So we don't really say that they're proper lit RPG, because it's more hand wavium, to go for a science fiction term to borrow on. But then the Russians were the very first ones to do it, because there's such a culture of gaming and all that, that they were like, well, let's join gaming and books together and have a great time with it. And then it came over to the States, and it's gone. It's kind of been more cemented, the rules of what is lit RPG and what isn't. Because with the Russians, it was sometimes they would have character sheets, sometimes they wouldn't have character sheets, sometimes it would be related to a game, sometimes it wouldn't. And so it just came down to now it's you got to have some kind of progression that leads to the development of characters in the book, which became like I guess the American definition of lit RPG. Because yeah, there's like 3 main branches, but
okay. Well, I'm probably a bit more familiar with maybe the Asian one because of anime, and there's Sword Art out online, and there's also my favorite, which is Log Horizon. Than I am with the Russian or the Western one. I mean, I hadn't even heard of the Russian kind before.
There's actually very few, just because they've had to be translated over. But they're great reads, and I think they are some of the earliest ones. But now, segue because of Ready Player One. Ready Player One was really like, it's not technically lit RPG because it doesn't have those skill screens as much. It certainly opened up that realm of people started having a look at seeing, well, I like that. Now let's see what's other books there. And then there was a very small but growing community of writers that were video games, and I like books, and I want to put the two together and have fun with it.
So if someone was writing in the Western one, which you would say probably for Western readers, which is who we usually market to, that would be the total way to go. So what do I want to say? So who actually reads these lit RPG people? What are these, what are the target readers here?
Diverse and a little strange. It really does, like as you were saying, like people that watch anime, it's they usually love this kind of thing because it's of the characters. Because like in a normal fantasy novel, yes, you see the progression of characters. They can do constantly harder and harder things, but this is you're actually seeing the physical numbers. There's a different dynamic to it because you're like, oh yes, he's got that amazing new sword, or he got a +2 to strength. It's an effect on how the characters do. So it really comes down to there's 3 main ways of readers, I would say. Play video games. There's people that don't have time for video games but still love the joy of it, can do a book, because when you're playing a video game, it's very easy to get stuck in for a few hours, like not too much progression or something. Because these really go on like an epic scale of this, because you'll see like characters that are getting like that legendary sword when they've only been in the game for like 2 hours. And it's like, if you were actually to have that in a game, the game dynamics would be so broken that people would just be like, this sucks. But then, so there's people who play video games, people who don't have time for video games, but people coming from a science fiction or fantasy. What I mean by that is, with fantasy and science fiction, it's been played out quite a bit. Library, and it's a great library, and it's still growing. But sometimes, like crossing between that you could possibly get into. So like VR's coming to the fore really quickly. People have always loved fantasy, like D&D is still doing amazing as it is. WoW's out there, and that's awesome. It's this is a possible way of you can actually play fantasy in the real world. And leave your job, go play a fantasy video game. You can go and be that wizard, or you can be that swordsmith that you want to be. Or on the other hand, you can go and play, and then you're now in playing a space game. You're fighting with ships, or you're fighting over resources for planets, and going to different So it's, I guess it, by different degrees, it's like tilting the fantasy and science fiction world. The possibilities and like this might be something that happens in the future.
Okay. And I would also assume that the like you said, that there's a lot of D&D, and D&D at the moment is going through quite a huge resurgence with popularity of Twitch and things being streamed online like that. It's getting people back into it. And just like how Twitch is available for people who would like to D&D, but either don't have the time or don't have the people, they can at least enjoy watching other people play D&D for a while. And it sounds like that reading a lit RPG novel is the same kind of what you're saying, is those who can't game or don't have time to game can also just dip into it for a wee while by reading a lit RPG book.
Yeah, like exactly what you said. Like even I've played some D&D games and they've gone on for months. Like you're always, it's like once a week and you want your little fix of like, okay, we're gonna go and take this damn castle because we've been seeing it for the last 3 weeks and we've made our way there. We've got through all these bleeding trolls and then some bats come and kidnapped our friends. So it's like all these side plots. But I think it's really condensed. It's condensed down, and the role playing that you can have in a D&D group, because like when the people are actually role playing their characters and they're or like in WoW where they're being the leadership and they're playing along with the guild, and the guild becomes such an entity in their lives that it actually has an effect on like this time, because I've got a raid at this time and I need to do all the prep and all of this kind of stuff. It condenses that down and brings in the kind of narrative and like epic scales that you've seen in fantasy novels and science fiction novels. All of that interweaving like crazy random goodness, and it'll just somehow work out, or it'll just loop like again, friends getting kidnapped by bats, and then it goes off on a side bender, and it's a lot of fun just playing around and seeing where it'll go with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does sound like it could be quite a bit of fun. I mean, I personally haven't read rather is what I'm trying to say. I personally haven't read any lit RPG, but I know about Ready Player One and how it's kind of like a Willy Wonka versus a computer game kind of deal there. But what would you say are the most common tropes in a lit RPG novel? What does a lit RPG novel need?
There's a couple of things. So first of all, you got to figure out what got like, are you going into a fantasy setting, or are you going into a science fiction setting? And then from there, you have different paths. Like with science fiction settings, what's mostly happened has replaced fighting because it's less barbaric, and you can see that with our society, like how you've got like video games of virtual reality, and it's like go fight in that, and it'll be a great time. And or you have like the fantasy setting where it's someone's going into VR, or they're somehow magically being transported to a different world, and so there's always a mechanism for coming from Earth, and usually around about this time or in near future, which is another thing that like it's really gripping because it's like it's a possibility that could happen.
Okay.
And from there, you've got to have a vehicle of transportation to actually take you to the game. It'll be VR, but the way the mechanism getting there can be different because there's people who are disabled. They have, say, like a poor quality of life here, so they go into VR to get a better quality of life, or like because they get legs. Like people with they're going to die. So I'm very grim most of the time of like one to the other, because it's like, oh, you're in this other world, everything can only get better. So some calamity has happened, and they've escaped the world into VR, as people escape into books and video games to get away from the day-to-day like just stuff, right? Game, you have a lot of different things. So first of all, you're going to have a lot of gaming references, and Ready Player One did this to infinitum. It is just a lot of like little things. It's very sneaky and put in there. It's like, oh, I can understand where that comes from this game, or I can understand that because it was in my childhood or something like that. And it is very much the gamer way of being and using like acronyms and things you wouldn't realize, but then like as soon as you see it, you're just like, oh, that's a nice little treat there.
Yeah.
So there's always the references, but there's also like sometimes characters are overpowered. This is a big discussion that we've had with LitRPG. Some characters are overpowered just because of the experiences they go through so fast that they go from the bottom, a decent middling level very quickly. They have a lot of strength. Well, they can have strength, they can have magic power, they can have the best ship in the world, or a really awesome sword. But it's very much the progression of overpowered characters compared to characters that have to like think out their positions, because like both of them do, but sometimes like say you're getting a skill point, and then you have to pick where you want that to go within the character sheet. But then you've got to look at the character sheet and say, okay, so if I increase this, then I can use this attack, or I can use this spell. So it turns into a very interesting dynamic of like, you've got to use those things sparingly to increase your character's power, but where it messes it up, because like you could like you need to do strength and intelligence, and for some reason you've done agility, so you can run really fast. Thing worth a damn. So you've got to do the balancing there. But yeah, those are some of the biggest ones, and also like getting stuck into the game. So usually at the beginning of LitRPG books, there's a bit of back and forth between the normal world and being in the game. But as anyone that's played a video game, it's much more fun to be gaming than it is to be just sitting around. So a lot of times it just segues into somehow they're able to stay in the gaming world, whether this be through technological means. They've somehow transitioned their minds into VR, right? But there's always again something to keep them there and keep them going on that level.
Okay. It does sound much broader than what I initially thought, because my experience through the anime is that the characters have been brought there and they're trapped there. So I assumed that LitRPG was the main character or characters getting trapped within the game and having to survive the game and find a way out. But it sounds like it can be a much broader choice there for the characters.
Yeah, like there is some that have been trapped there, but it's just focus usually on the video game. It's however they can get the character to stay there. So, like with Sword Art Online, to say is just like they've been trapped there and they can't get out until they win the game. There have been LitRPG like that, but it's actually not as heavy within just like the American, the Western side of it. I know, well, at least the novels I've read on the Russian side of it, they have that a lot more. But yeah, there's like there's a tech and he's been playing a video game and he's somehow lost his memories and he's got to find his memories back, and as he's going through a game he gets his memories back, and he's like how to actually open the bloody admin page so he can get out of the game because of all his lost memories.
Is that the one where he can't remember the password to get to the admin page, so that's why he has to progress to get his memories back so he could get the password to get everyone out of the game? Yeah, I think I read the blurb for that one just the other day. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so I think it is sorry. Oh. Yeah, it's one of those like just a different mode of how it's gone, because it's gone from science fiction to fantasy, because it's just the way it's gone. Like most people, what I'm finding is they like stick just with like near future and then go into fantasy in the future, and then you've progressed into science fiction. There's no verse like I don't think there's anything below 2020, I guess, of like the starting date to start, just because of VR and augmentation or doing something magical. And
okay, what happens in your current trilogy? Because we might as well plug some of your books here. How have you done it?
So I kind of reversed things a little bit. It's basically the story of humans went out, they explored the universe, and they encountered this massive empire called the Ducal Empire. Goal was just, they were like, okay, the humans, they're fine or whatever. Like, we've got to like we'll find a position for them within our empire. They take that up, and then we continue to dominate everything, because interlinking parts between all of these different sects and anything otherwise. Humans didn't really like that, because they've already got so much division between them. They're usually like working by themselves, and they were getting along fine with the Ducal Empire, and it turned into a mess because the Ducal were like, some people that are taking our technology on the black market, and then instead of the cottage person makes one item that they had going on with these other is that they basically owned, they were just like, they're mass producing them, they're pulling them out of factories and this kind of stuff, and the human empire is going to really, well, humanity is just going to overrun them with economic like ways, and they're going to fall apart. So they did a preemptive strike, and basically they just started pushing back humanity. Been using virtual reality for a while because people, it's faster at like understand what's going on. And they got pushed back though, because the Ducal just have this massive empire, tons of ships, tons of firepower. And what happens is humanity is basically on out their last legs. Soul system's been totally blown up, and the Ducal are just like, okay, well, the human threat's done with. The problem is they've got all these other aggressive species that they need to kill off, because they're encroaching on the Ducal Empire as well. So like, well, we need a solution because our fleet's really busted up. We don't have any resources left to get them fixed up, because we don't have factories. We've been making them with like one person makes the engine, one person makes the cooling system, one person makes the body. But they've like, okay, so we've got to find a fighting force to kill off all of these like creatures, and we need it done yesterday, because if we don't, then we're going to lose anyway. So one guy comes up with this thing, and he calls it Emerillia. It's the Trap Mine Project. Well, like for Ducal, Emerillia means Trap Mine Project. And his idea is to basically make a fantasy world. Take a whole bunch of Ducal technology, put it into humans, make them think that the reality is a video game, then like birth them in a simulation of Earth, so that they think like Earth is the real one. To the video game, they think that's like, it's Matrix basically. So Then he's like, well, we could do this, and they're like, okay, we'll give it a try. So what they do is they try it out, and it starts being like really successful because they've seeded a whole bunch of races from a fantasy video game that they've pulled, and then they've put in these players who think it's just a video game. And when you play a video game like GTA, say, the amount of violence and just you don't care about anything, like you want to get your goals done, you're going to come back anyway, and all this kind of stuff. So it was just that. They went out and it was a huge success. They started wiping out aggressive species, and what they could do is they could birth a cycle of players every like 9 or so years. And they just keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. And it turned into this thing of someone started watching. The Ducal Empire started watching humans for blood sport because it's like, hey, look at this lower race. We've conquered them. It's kind of like a Roman thing. Like, look, here's the Huns. We've defeated the Huns. We've now got them fighting in our arena. They have no honor left anymore. And it turned into an entertainment way for them. And then this, like, my book just follows a character who's, through mitigating circumstances, he's kind of broken the Earth simulation. And then when he comes over to Emerillia, he finds out the truth about Emerillia. He finds out Emerillia is actual reality. And he's like, well, crap, I've got to do something about this. And he, like, it's for him, he just starts going through it and seeing what he can do. And so, yeah, he just picks up friends, gets resources, levels himself up because he needs to get stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And he's trying to use the system to like go against everything that's like coming at him. And it turns into one hell of a mess, but an interesting mess in the end.
So I could, like you said, you mentioned Matrix. I can see a lot of Matrix in there, and you're right. You have reversed it. That they think they're in the real world, but they're not in the real world. But when they're playing, they're actually in the real world. Yeah. I see this.
Pretty complicated trying to explain it at times. The easiest way I've come to Matrix every single time. It's like, yeah, fantasy style thrown in.
I actually read something recently about the Matrix, which was an interesting take on it. It was like an alternative plot line that the machines were actually trying to save humanity by keeping them in the Matrix while the Earth was trying to be reborn or recovered because the humans had actually been the ones to cause the devastation while they'd been fighting the robots in the first place. So by the Zionists going out and trying to get everyone out of the Matrix, they were actually destroying what could have been one of their ways to save humanity from the robot's perspective. And I said that to my husband, and then he went, "Shut the fuck up."
Yeah, just
mind blown.
Yeah, when you think of that, it's actually like that can make a lot of sense, especially when you see Neo. He comes over it, and you just see Earth is literally covered in clouds. So humans can't really live under that because there's no sun, there's nothing to grow, and it's all irradiated.
Mm-hmm. And yet they're trying to get and yet they're trying to. So it's almost like, oh, that maybe they're the bad guys, and Agent Smith's just really trying to stop them from hurting themselves. So it's like, wow.
It's interesting how like one thing that can just change the entire story. It's like, that's okay.
Because not many people look at it from the so-called antagonist point of view, and then you've really got to remember that everyone is a protagonist in their own story. So
it's very, very true.
It's quite interesting. What I want to ask you next is you've previously written in science fiction, but what made you specifically decide to start writing in LitRPG? What was the catalyst or the trigger?
I guess it was a combination of things. It always is. It's one thing, and then it just gradual landslide into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's started. I don't know how or why I was in this side of Amazon, because Amazon usually finds you a category and says, "Oh, it's science fiction" or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or a few video games off of Amazon, and they were like, "Oh, look." But I read a book by Travis Bagwell, and I checked it out, and I was like, quite interesting. There was like there's all these stat sheets and all this kind of stuff, and I'm quite a big. I love my video games, and I was reading it. I was like, this is great stuff, and I was like, okay, well, I'll read the next one. So I open up the next book, and it's like by Alaron Kong, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. And then I'll go to the next one, and it's like Blaze Corvin, and it's just like it turned into this thing where it's like, I think I was like 10 books deep in about 5 days, and I hadn't really slept much, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to do something about this, because I was midway through my Harmony War series, and it's quite a dark series by the end of it. And I was like, you know what? I just want something a little bit fun, a little all this. And I was like thinking, well, I'll just play some video games, take the mind off of it, and then go to the next series. Instead, it turned into, well, how about I write half of a book about video games and then give it a try? And so I draft, and I sent it to one of my beta readers for the Harmony War series. You also mentioned that you like fantasy. It's like, just try this out for size. Tell me what you think. And he's like it. Weird, but I like it. I was like, okay. So I'm not sure if I want to do this yet, because I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket, because I like science fiction and it's good fun and I have plans for it. And I'll go to this website called Royal Road.
Sorry, what was that one?
RoyalRoadL.com. And it's basically it's like a chapter by chapter system. I'm trying to think of the other one, Wattpad. It's very similar to Wattpad, but it's been focused on science fiction, fantasy, and LitRPG, and I think a few, what's it called, light novel, like Chinese and Japanese light novel situations. So I checked that out, and I was like, well, there's a whole bunch of people that started off here, and then they produced it onto Amazon. And I was like, well, I'll see what people think about this. So I started putting up, I think, a chapter every like a couple of days. And I was just like asking people for reviews and feedback and all that. And I think it was within about a week or two, I started getting in a few reviews, and it was like, okay, so there are a few mistakes. I've messed up in a few places, but it seems like people are actually interested in the idea of what's going on here. So I was like, well, I might as well give it a try. So I finished off the Harmony War series. It took about a couple months, I think, while I was writing and putting up on Royal Road. And then I put out my first book in, it was January, February, sometime around there. And then just started going with it on Amazon, just taking them down for Royal Road, adding in scenes, editing them out, and then put them onto Amazon. And it was just like, just love this genre, because there's not many books out yet, but there is a big transition of other people and other writers coming over from different genres and being like, yeah, I want to give this a try, because I think it's so easy to read, and it's so connected to what we have. So it like, again, like, you have those little sayings, and it just sparks like an instant connection between them. And yeah, ever since then, it's been magic in one way. It's just working through that, just putting them out as I can, and then
okay. So You said you were just putting them up. Were you also doing any marketing or promoting? Do you know how do you market something like LitRPG where it still seems so new to a lot of people?
Well, there's actually, I think this is marketed it actually not that much because there's two groups on Facebook really good for LitRPG. There's LitRPG, just that, and then there's LitRPG Society.
Okay.
Groups have like a great following of not only readers but like aspiring authors or people that already have their books out there, which is also great because there's always like tons of giveaways and signed copies and all that good stuff. And so you can enter into the contest and you're like, oh, to your mate who's also an author, I'm like, oh, can I get a signed copy now? And he's like, oh, for God's sakes. But it is a lot of fun and it's a great community to get involved in. And because it's not even just books. It's about, like, you'll have stuff about VR, you'll have stuff about video games, you'll have different technologies and stuff that have been discussed in these books. And then people are like, concurrently, it's becoming a reality, which is a very, very strange thing, because when you're writing science fiction, you're like, okay, that would be a cool technology if it's built, but for it to be built, I'm going to have to be like 317 in about that time for it to come through. That it's very, very interesting group dynamic there, which is a great fun to get involved with. Like, I put up my book on, I told the people on Raw Road, and I told the people in 2 LitRPG groups. And I think that was pretty much the only promotion I had going for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, the whole, just normal, like advertisement through people like ebook soda and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I find it interesting because it looks like most of the books in LitRPG are marketed about $3.99 to $5.99, so it's a really nice, sweet price range that a lot of authors in other genres are probably like, man, that would be fucking awesome. And I've just looked up your first book, The Trapped Mind Project, the Emilia book 1, and it's currently ranked as number 1,267 in the entire paid Kindle stores. So I mean, you've got to be doing something right. You've obviously hit what people want to read in a emerging genre at the right price range, and actually finding those right people. It's amazing.
Well, Chris Fox, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Chris Fox, with his find that category, just nail it on the head. I think it is an emerging category, and there weren't. That's why I should say there weren't that many authors in this category about months ago. But it's had such a draw on people, and the connection that authors have had to it, the creativity aspect, and the fact that everything that we are doing now is usually brand new, it's a great amount of fun, and the creativity is just it. You talk to the authors there, and they're having as much fun as the readers, if not more, just writing these stories and having a great time. And it is a sweet number. There are the more expensive ones. There are the less expensive ones. Really, it's what you like that would define what you want to get, as well as there is a whole bunch of people that are doing Kindle Unlimited, like myself included, just because while it is nice having a book up for $3.99 or $4.99, the Kindle Unlimited program makes it a lot more accessible to people, and it works out quite nicely. Especially, like, I don't think I have a book. I think I might have 1 or 2 books that are under the 100,000 word marker. So it's nice to give a nice large book out. It's like the weirdest one. Well, the weird and great was I got a message, and I think it was 5-6 hours after I released the second book, and someone says, "Thanks for the book. When can I have the next one?" And I'm like, "You just read an average of about like 100 pages an hour, and you already want the next one." I'm just like, "It's gonna be out in 2 weeks." Oh God.
Oh, well, at least 2 weeks isn't like a month, you know, or 2 months, or if you would traditionally published a year or two, you know. That he's quite lucky, but we as readers do really demand the next book, you know, instantaneously, because it's the internet, you know. We want it now.
Everything's so fast now. But it was one of those moments where I was just like, I was laughing and I was just like, I can't even respond to this. I haven't slept in like 2 days because I mucked up a graph and I had to go fix it. And it was like, you've got like something like 14 days to go. And I was like, you've got 14 days. And I was just like, I've just had to take a walk around my house, just like, God damn, how are you this fast?
Yeah, it's one of those instances where you're happy and sad as an author, I suppose, at the same time. You're happy because they've read it and they want the next one. You're sad because you don't have the next one ready. And it's like, whoa.
It's just like, oh God, I don't know what to do in this one. But no, it's great fun, and it's always great because people are they get so involved in it, because it's not just the characters and all that. It's the depth of like a video game, because like you'll have like those combinations. Like there's people that research the combinations of different moves applied together, and then if they work out just right, then they become like this crazy character, and then you're just like, I'd never want to play against this character ever again because I know that they're just going to kick my ass across the field so easily. But it's a great amount of fun to do. But it is strange from a writing perspective, just because it's very numerically based. That was the first one. Second, there's such a large readership. Like the people love to read this stuff, and I've had a lot of people that have gone from science fiction books that I was writing, they came right over and they were like, we kind of like this, and we'll give it a try, because they'll go on to other science fiction based like ones. Like mine's more fantasy based, but they'll get like the ones that are proper like spaceships and space marines and that good stuff. But it's like it's so strange because like with science fiction, like it's hard to find a proper good science fiction book reading group, just simply because it's usually promotions of this and that, and this is like for like writers, like I'm probably guilty of this as well, but it kind of detracts from it a little bit, because there's so many advertisements that have gone up that it's washing out the actual discussions about the story, which is one thing that I do like about the LitRPG groups on the Facebook, because it's so concentrated on the story. Like you have someone that comes in and says, what's the other books that we've got in here? And then you'll have like various people put up lists of what they've reviewed. And I'm probably going to say this wrong. Ramon Mija. I'm not sure. My pronunciation of names is horrible, absolutely horrible. But he does this review of lit RPG groups, and he just does like sorry, not lit RPG groups, lit RPG books, and he has like a comprehensive list of them all, and it's really nice to go through, because it's like the biggest thing I found is with other genres, audiobooks, and there's also not many good review sites, like because it's the genre's has so many books in it. It's really hard to get through all of them, right? It's like it's very condensed. It's broken down nicely, because you got your fantasy ones and you got your science fiction ones, and that works out quite nicely, because it's usually you want one or the other. You don't want to mix and match. And yeah, it's also got audiobooks, and audiobooks are a big thing within LitRPG because it's harder to get audiobooks in most other genres. I found but with LitRPG, I think it's about like 60% or so of the authors are getting, they either have an audiobook or they're going to be getting an audiobook. Like personally, I've been looking at getting audiobook for like other genres and other books that I've had. The first one I've actually taken the dive into audiobooks for, just because the response has been so like large that I'm like, because it is a bit of a risk going in there to like give it a try and see what's going on with it.
And I suppose at some point maybe your book will be available in VR.
One can only hope.
So I think it's about time we end out this discussion. I mean, but it's been a really fascinating subject, and I think it's something I'm going to look into a bit more. And I know that Xavier's really bummed to have missed this because he was really intrigued by the whole thing. But what's the one piece of advice you think you would give to an author who was looking to get into LitRPG?
I think the biggest thing would be to not only check out the Facebook groups, but to check out Royal Road, just because it is a hub of LitRPG, and people can go through there and they can clearly see on a chapter by chapter basis of what people have been thinking about it. It's a great place to check out your novel and get it beta read, and make sure that you're fulfilling all of the needs of what people are wanting to read. And I think it's probably one of the best launching platforms I've ever used for a book. So yeah, definitely Royal Road and the LitRPG groups on Facebook.
Awesome. It does sound like, because it's still emerging, that there's a smaller number of authors than like there would be in romance. So it's at the moment a lot easier to get involved in that community and get that one-on-one feedback that you need.
Like there is a larger amount of authors coming over, which is great because there is a need for it. I think there's probably around like 50 or 60 novels in total. I'm not sure. That's a very, very rough number. Don't quote me on that. But I think it's around 50 or 60 novels in the LitRPG. And so like now we're having like I myself was coming over from a different genre, and other people are coming over from different genres, and it's adding in a really new perspective and an interesting perspective because it's growing so much, but it's coming from a background of these have been people that have done other works and that kind of thing.
That's awesome. So thank you very much, Michael, for coming in and talking to me today about LitRPG. Where can people find you specifically on the internet?
They can find me at michaelchatfield.com. I've got a website there, and it links to all of my good stuff. So all the book series and all the upcoming releases and that good stuff. And yeah, if you ever want to like get in contact with me, just go find me on there.
That is great. Thank you once again, Michael. I just keep thanking you because it's really nice to have a one-on-one discussion sometimes. Sorry, X, to say that, but it is nice just to have a back and forth like that. And people can find the Publishing Without Supervision podcast on pwspodcast.com, and this podcast will also include all of the links to all of the sites and some of the books that Michael mentioned in this podcast. So thank you everyone for listening, and since X isn't here, I will end it with good night, internet.
Bye.